this, there's been a very useful report by an organisation called Matrix Evidence. It was sponsored by John Lewis Partnership and a new employee-owned business called Circle that is winning contracts in the health sector to run hospitals and I think even the whole PCT. They've taken over all the responsibilities of the primary care trust in the UK. But they say, you know, this combined individual and collective ownership approach can demonstrably improve the viability and political efficacy of a social entrepreneurial approach. So that's a very recent review of about 58 studies. Yeah. The early research into the Mondragon, this was quite an influential, small little book, but quite influential. They found that in terms of staff participation in decision making, it was 3 to 5 times higher. The reason it's 3 to 5 times is they looked at different types of decision making, and in some areas people report. They basically took a group of the co-ops, a group of private companies that are about the same size in the local area and did much the same thing, and compared what the staff said about their involvement in participation in decision making. They also give, the average UK FTSE 100 company gives 1% of its profits to social, educational, or charitable projects. They have to, by law, give at least 10% and sometimes give more. So we're looking at 1,000 higher percent investment in social and educational projects relative to a typical private sector corporate. We've got another new study sponsored by the John Lewis Partnership that looks at how these companies have been performing in the recession at the moment. And they found that employee-owned businesses grew at 12.7% in terms of staff numbers, while other companies grew only 2.7% in this sample, and their sales grew 11%, whereas the other ones were almost static. So there's something going on in these businesses that enable them to survive the economic downturn in a way that private companies cannot, and we can speculate as to what that might be. But the report speculates that because they are not dependent on capital from external markets, they have to generate their own capital. Yeah? They're not as vulnerable to what's going on when the markets crash, but they also report that there is a fundamentally different attitude to surviving crisis. That these organisations tend to draw on their reserves when they see a crisis coming, to invest in staff, to invest in customer relations, whereas private sector companies typically respond by cutting the workforce to cut costs. And of course, if you cut staff and cut costs, you can expect sales to go down. You can expect that growth won't occur. So there might be something in that, but it's just, I can't say there's no conclusive proof of that yet, but they're raising the question as to why they're performing much better. And yeah, that's the point I just made. And then a study I did, I was comparing within the worker co-op side, those that have share ownership and those that don't. I did find that those that had share ownership were growing much more rapidly than those that did not. I was looking basically at the entire, how many people have they employed over the entire life of their trading. Aggregate together all of the trading years that each set of organisations had traded for, and how many staff did they now have in the organisation, and you can see their potential for growing the workforce. But they were also more volatile. Yeah, one of them that grew rapidly then had to disband. Yeah. They actually gave the assets to another cooperative that has then built it back up again. But the point is they went through quite a lot of culture shock by changing from one type of co-op to another.
Can I ask, sorry?
Yes, go on.
Can you just go back one slide?
Yeah.
Lampel 2010, those 3 bullet points there.
Yes.
Are they comparing similar size companies then?
They claim to be. It's a new, you can get it off the website of the John Lewis Partnership website. I think I've got a reference. I've got a reference at the back.
I just think, John Lewis Partnership, John Lewis stores that we know, Waitrose that we know, they only need to open up a couple of new outlets, and you could understand why they're increasing their number of staffing.
Yes, but the sample isn't just John Lewis. They've got 41 different businesses
Okay, right,
Yeah,
fine.
yeah. So I suspect that John Lewis, I'm not sure if the report is actually clear about whether John Lewis is inside that sample or not.
Right, okay.
Yeah. The Employee Ownership Association, which is like the national body that is backed by John Lewis, has been tracking the share price of employee-owned businesses because they do have shares in a conventional private company sense, even if they're owned by a trust or by the workforce individually. They do vary in price. They do have ways of pricing the shares, and they compare those to the performance of other businesses to see how those shares perform. And they gave out a sort of card at one of their conferences in 2009 to show that it performs about 6% better a year, which doesn't sound a great deal, but if over 10 years, that has quite a substantial difference. Right, so let's have a quick look at the video. I hope this will play. I'm only going to play you about sort of 15, 16 minutes of it, just to look at the history that underpinned the thinking in Mondragon, and particularly it rebuilt a community after they'd been very devastated by a civil war. So it was very definitely community development.